Signal S109 had been passed at danger 8 times before. On the 9th, 31 people died at Paddington. The Ladbroke Grove Rail Inquiry Part 1 report, authored by Lord Cullen, documents the severe, systemic, technical, and human failures culminating in the catastrophic head-on collision on October 5, 1999. Part 1. The morning sequence. The critical events of October 5th unfolded rapidly over a narrow window of less than 3 minutes, terminating in a massive kinetic impact. At 08:06, a Thames Trains 3-car turbo-class 165 diesel unit driven by newly qualified driver Michael Hodder departed Platform 9 at Paddington Station bound for Bedwin in Wiltshire. At 08:07 and 50 seconds, the turbo occupied track circuit GK on passing signal SN87, which was showing a single yellow aspect, and crossed from line 4 to line 3. At 08:08 and 25 seconds, traveling at 41 miles per hour, the turbo passed signal SN109 on gantry 8. Signal SN109 was at red for danger. Because the track points beyond SN109 lay in their normal position, the turbo was inevitably carried across Swing Nose Crossing and directly onto the up main line. 33 seconds later, the turbo struck the incoming 0603 First Great Western high-speed train. The head-on collision occurred approximately 58 sleepers east of the tip of the crossing blade. Driver Hodder initiated an emergency brake application and slammed the throttle shut just a few seconds before impact. Brian Cooper, the driver of the high-speed train, also braked heavily. Neither action had any significant effect on the kinetic energy of the collision. The impact was virtually head-on, taking place at a combined speed of approximately 130 miles per hour. The drag box behind the leading coupler of the turbo was forced back and upwards, separating the leading bogie and entirely destroying the cab and leading section of the floor. The human cost of the collision was devastating. 31 people died, including both train drivers Brian Cooper and Michael Hodder, who were killed instantly. 24 of the fatalities occurred on the Thames Trains turbo, and 7 occurred on the First Great Western high-speed train. Out of the 570 combined passengers, over 400 were injured, resulting in 227 hospital admissions. The initial impact shattered the rolling stock, but the ensuing horror was multiplied by fires caused by the rapid dispersal and ignition of diesel fuel. The destruction of the fuel tank on the front car of the turbo, containing 688 liters of diesel, created a massive fireball. Lord Cullen's report meticulously details this post-crash fire. Paragraph 4.47 of the report states, "The establishment and rapid spread of fire within Coach H were a consequence of the contamination of the interior materials by diesel fuel. The airborne dispersion of this fuel entered Coach H through broken windows and structural penetrations, engulfing the interior and causing severe burn injuries and fatalities among the trapped passengers." Part 2. The failure of signal SN109. The physical wreckage at Ladbroke Grove was the direct result of a technical infrastructure failure, specifically concerning the visibility and placement of the signaling system on gantry 8. The sighting geometry of signal SN109 was severely compromised by multiple overlapping physical factors. As a driver approached, the lower yellow aspect was heavily obscured by the underside of Portobello Bridge. The upper yellow and red aspects were heavily obstructed by the overhead line equipment. Furthermore, at 08:08 on the cloudless morning of October 5th, bright sunlight struck the signal head at an angle of incidence of only 11 degrees. This highly unusual angle generated internal reflection on the unlit yellow lamps and reduced the visual saturation of the critical red lamp. The specific non-standard arrangement of the signal heads directly compounded the obstruction. Paragraph 1.8 of the Cullen report documents this exact failure. The unusual configuration of SN109, a reverse L, not only impaired initial sighting of its red aspect, but also might well have misled an inexperienced driver, such as driver Hodder, who was looking at the signal at close range, into thinking that it was not showing a red, but a perceived aspect. The signal design unequivocally violated established safety regulations for readability. Paragraph 5.69 of the report details this non-compliance. The Committee of Experts on Signal Sighting were agreed that SN109 was not compliant in regard to Class 165 trains with the requirement of the current Railway Group Standard, GK/RT0037, in respect that the whole signal could not be seen for at least 7 seconds sighting time, that is at line speed, from the cab of such a train. The red aspect didn't become fully free of obscuration until the train was 168 meters away, providing only 6.25 seconds of sighting time at line speed. The danger of SN109 wasn't theoretical. It was a proven, repeated hazard.
Between August 1993 and August 1998, signal SN109 had been passed at danger 8 separate times. These incidents, known as SPADs, signals passed at danger, included a severe incident on February 4, 1998, described during the inquiry as a dress rehearsal for Ladbroke Grove, where a driver failed to correctly read the signal until emerging from under the bridge. Despite these 8 preceding warnings, Railtrack demonstrated a persistent failure to convene formal signal sighting committees to assess and rectify the known dangers of the layout. Part 3. Institutional and management failures. The disaster exposed profound institutional dysfunction up the chain of command, particularly regarding the management of driver training by Thames Trains and infrastructure management by Railtrack.
Michael Hodder possessed only slender experience. He passed out as a fully qualified driver on September 22, 1999, less than 2 weeks before the crash. He received 250 practical hours under instruction. While trainers praised his application, the training structure at Thames Trains was disjointed. Instructors were conducting classes based loosely on older practices, training material wasn't validated, and route knowledge teaching was severely deficient. Thames Trains failed to prepare Hodder for the exact known hazards of the route. Paragraph 1.7 of the Cullen report records this omission. It was acknowledged by Thames Trains that he had not been instructed directly about signals which had been passed at danger, SPADs, and the assessment of his route knowledge did not specifically cover the section between Paddington Station and Ladbroke Grove. He was entirely unaware that SN109 was a multi-SPAD signal.
The systemic nature of these training deficiencies drew definitive censure. Lord Cullen delivers his judgment on the operating company in paragraph 1.15. I conclude that the safety culture in regard to training was slack and less than adequate, and that there were significant failures in communication within the organization.
Operational failures extended to the Integrated Electronic Control Center at Slough. At 08:08 and 29 seconds, a SPAD alarm sounded when the turbo occupied track circuit GE without SN109 being cleared. Signaller Thorburn monitored the workstation but took no immediate action, expecting the train to stop within the 563-meter overlap zone. It wasn't until 08:08 and 49.5 seconds, over 20 seconds after the initial alarm, that signal SN120 was replaced to red in the face of the approaching high-speed train. This delay prevented an emergency radio message from reaching the turbo in time. The delay at the control center was symptomatic of broader operational complacency regarding signals passed at danger. Paragraph 1.9 of the report details this finding. The evidence of the signaller and other members of the staff at the IECC indicated that there was a serious underrating of the risks involved in SPADs, a failure to realize the importance of immediate and direct communication with the driver where that was possible, and a dangerously complacent attitude to SPADs as being simply a matter of driver error.
Part 4. Root Causes and Recommendations. Lord Cullen's inquiry establishes definitive findings on regulatory accountability, systemic paralysis, and outlines mandatory recommendations to restructure railway safety.
Railtrack's failure to proactively manage the safety of the infrastructure was central to the disaster. Paragraph 1.10 of the report states, there was a serious and persistent failure to convene signal sighting committees as they should have been, because of the changes to the signals and the fact that signals had been repeatedly passed at danger. This was due to a combination of incompetent management and inadequate procedures.
The management culture at Railtrack was found to be fundamentally passive. Paragraph 1.11 of the Cullen report highlights this administrative paralysis. The impression given by the evidence was that senior management were content to wait till proposals had been put up to them and failed to give and maintain the lead in seeking solutions and ensuring a response.
Regulatory oversight also collapsed. Her Majesty's Railway Inspectorate permitted the flawed Paddington infrastructure to operate for years without formal authorization. Paragraph 1.16 confirms, neither phase of the resignaling scheme was approved by the HMRI prior to the crash at Ladbroke Grove. The Inspectorate acknowledged placing too much trust in duty holders and lacking the vigor to pursue critical safety issues.
Technological safeguards that could have physically overridden human error were evaluated and rejected prior to the crash. Based on cost-benefit analyses, Thames Trains chose not to fit automatic train protection. Paragraph 1.14 of the report documents this. Since it was highly probable that the crash would not have happened if the turbo had been fitted with automatic train protection, ATP, in connection with the pilot system, which was in operation in the Great Western Zone, the inquiry examined the basis for the decision of Thames Trains that their trains should not be so fitted. The absence of ATP left the system entirely dependent on the driver's visual reading of a fatally obscured signal.
To prevent recurrence, Lord Cullen outlined strict recommendations to overhaul railway infrastructure. These include the implementation of a national system of train radio communication to allow immediate emergency contact with drivers. Furthermore, the report mandates a revision of rail vehicle crashworthiness standards, specific measures to prevent the airborne dispersion of diesel fuel, and an immediate safety examination of the complex layout over the first 2 miles from Paddington Station, including evaluations for flank protection.
The Ladbroke Grove crash was the catastrophic culmination of disjointed driver training, fatally non-compliant signal design, and an institutional failure to act on repeated, documented warnings. The findings of the Part 1 report demand structural accountability. How will the railway industry ensure that institutional complacency never again costs 31 lives?